Cool. We're back. All right, guys. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode uh, of the Come Up channel, where I get the opportunity to interview a person about their lives, to review some successes and some failures in their life that others can learn from or even get inspired from. And also, should you want to follow a similar path, you can see how they did it. So, my guest today was in the Brazilian Marines, serving as an MP for 1 year. Then went to the Second Infantry Marines for 2 years, 4 years in a Special Forces unit, 2 years in an Airspace Control unit, where he would have a total of 10.5 years in the Brazilian military. He now serves in the Army National Guard as a combat medic. And then finally, he's currently a fitness influencer, trainer, triathlon runner. So, welcome, my guest, Igor Torves.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate the invitation to be here. I'm super honored. Um, yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm gonna start with a couple warmer questions. I call it "How would you respond?" So, first one's gonna be, "What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?"
Um, just get started. It's literally what it is, straight up. Whatever you want to do in life. A friend of mine told me, many, many years ago, and I've heard that from coaches and mentors I've had in the past. And if you want to do something, get started. Figure it, and then you'll figure it out.
Got you. Next one's gonna be, "What's your biggest regret?"
Um, I would say my biggest regret was probably heavily drinking in my 20s. I think I wasted a lot of time back then, but at the same time, it shaped me into the person I am today. Um, yeah.
Got you. Yeah, that is something that we are gonna kind of dive into, kind of towards the tail end of the episode as well. But next one's gonna be, "How do you balance your personal life with personal interests and relationships?" If that kind of makes sense.
Of course. I think, especially if you have a family, communication is extremely important, right? I think understanding how much time you do have available for the things you want to do, but also finding first what time you need and have employed on your responsibilities, work, school, family. Um, then from there, I personally um, like to see what I have going on for the entire week or half of the year,
Hmm.
make my commitments, and then I work around my priorities, which is my job, my family, and my business.
Got you. That's a good answer, man. So I got two
Thank you.
more. This one's gonna be, "What do you do to make a positive impact on those around you?"
Um, I think first, that was one of the things that led me to be a trainer, a coach, as a running coach, as a personal trainer. It is to bring a healthier lifestyle to those around me. Um, and for me, it comes down to leading by the example. It is, being a forefront, doing it, and not expecting that everybody will understand, but they can see it. And and also um, understand that people are in different times in their lives and they need to be respected of that. So I think it's speaking less and doing more is a great way to impact other people uh, by your actions.
Okay. And the last one's, it's pretty interesting, a little tricky. You'll kind of understand when I ask it. So if you need to take time just to kind of digest it, feel free to.
All right, I'll do it.
So the last one's going to be, "If you had to write a book about yourself, what would it be called and what would it be about?"
That's a good question. I really like this question. Uh, all right, send it again.
All right. So if you had to write a book about yourself, what would it be called? What would the title of the book be called? And then what would the book be about?
Um, Probably would be something like lessons of many, many failures, or um, you know, um, lessons from the lows,
Okay.
because I think, and that would be about, find yourself in a very, very low point in life, rock bottom, and then rebuilding yourself and showing that it's possible to make changes and live life the way you want by your own terms.
Okay. Yeah, that's good, man. For pretty good for kind of thinking on the fly.
Thank-
Now you gotta write a book, man. Now we're gonna wait for that book.
I like that idea. I'll,
Yes,
I'll
sir.
need, I'll definitely need a editor on that.
100%,
My
man.
wife is my editor. I'm English is my second language, so I gotta type it up and send to her. It's like, babe, you need to check it out.
Yeah, we'll get on it, man. We'll talk to her about it.
Yeah, all right,
Yeah,
cool.
so getting into your story now, we're of course going to
Uh,
start with growing up in Brazil. So just kind of starting with living and growing up in Brazil, just kind of walk us through that experience and, just kind of what that culture is like.
um, well, um, if we're going to compare, I'm 38 now. I'm almost 39. It was, a different time. I remember spending a lot of time outside. Um, Electronics were very limited. Even TV was very limited. I grew up in a simple family, very humble family. Um, didn't come from money or anything. Um, my I lived really, really far away from the city at first, and then when I was about 10 years old, we moved in closer to the city. I grew up in a kind of like smaller city in Brazil, 4 million people. Then I moved to Rio, which is about 12 to 18 million people. Um, and it was super different here in America. One of the things I can point out for sure is public transportation, for example. We didn't have a car. We had a car and we mostly would use during the weekends. So it was public transportation all the time to go to school. Um, things were super different here than America. Looking back, we didn't have an AC. You live in a city where it's 90 degrees throughout the entire summer, sometimes 100 degrees, and we didn't have an AC. Um, it was just the norm, right? You live, Brazil's a developing country, so even when your parents or you do have a middle class type of job, most households can only afford for a car for the entire family. Um, so there was a lot of walking, a lot of public transportation, um, and also we were exposed to violence really early on in life. Looking back, I've been in America for 7 years only, um, and then when I look back, it's just incredible how human beings can consider that being your norm. You see people, getting robbed in the streets, and we talk about it. It's just another
Yeah.
day, you know. Then when I moved to Rio, we used to see firefights between either cartel and cops, cartel and cartel. And then you grow up seeing those things, and it's just a norm to you. Um, but also there's really good things about it growing up in Brazil. Access to fresh fruit, access to fresh things from the ocean. I grew up by the ocean, so I used to buy fish at the fish market when the guys were coming out of the ocean with the fishes. So there was that as well. Culturally, Brazil is known for a lot of, party. We like to party hard. Um, so I did embrace that for a long time, especially joining the Marine Corps. It was crazy. Um, so you go to, as a younger male, you go to a bar, and then 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. the club opens, and then it stays open until 6 in the morning, and from 6 in the morning you go to the bar again, and you can drink on the streets. So there's no rules, no laws to stop somebody from drinking for 3 days straight. Some parties in my hometown, the city I grew up in, it lasts for 7 days. So it's 7 days of party, no work. Um, you used to see people all the time. Um, so I think that in that aspect, society is super cohesive and close to each other. People are in and out from each other's houses all the time. Um, but there's for sure, things that we saw growing up in a developing country, such as maybe your friends didn't have food for, a few days, or my parents were part of a church, and then they would take us to church missions, where pretty much would go and try to feed kids in developing areas or underdeveloped areas. And there are kids that we met there, they would have one pair of jeans for two kids to go to school. So the older one would wear in the morning, the younger one would wear the same pants in the afternoon. So there is the struggle of life, very particular to developing countries.
Hmm. Does that give you like kind of the things that you mentioned with, not having AC, some people, some people, not having food for days, just all those different things, and then being here in the US, does that give you like a big source of gratification, but also like that thought of like, how in the world did I live through that, and then transition to living here, kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. That's something I think all the time. And I talk to, my stepkids about it. It's like, hey, you got to be grateful for this, because this is 1% of the world that lives this way. And puts things into perspective that can always be so much worse. We're super spoiled here, and I've been here for 7 years now. So sometimes I find myself, with the mentality of getting spoiled, and I have to talk to myself like, hey, just look back, look where you came from. Like, you can't be mad about your iPad not syncing properly with your iPhone, because 10 years ago you only had a phone and that's it. um and yes, to respond to your question, it does, it gives me a lot of gratitude to be here.
Got you. And in terms of like the education system in Brazil, how kind of was that experience for you? Like describing that the education system in Brazil.
The education system in Brazil is super different from what we have here. um, If you're going to any sort of public school, you might finish high school not knowing how to write properly, or barely writing your name. Um, Many, many years ago, Brazil's government issued this thing that uh, um, nobody could be, people were, they had to go to the next level in high school, whether they make it or not. So they couldn't get any sort of, even if they were like straight C's, they would go to the next one forward. And they would finish high school not even knowing how anything like history, math, basically, basic math or basic writing skills, none. So the other option is to use the private system, uh, which is most people will go to if their family can afford. Um, so I had, for example, my grandparents paying for my school and my parents paying for my brother's school, so we could both go to a decent school. Um, yeah, and if you think about, let's say structure, I had never seen a running track in my life until I was in the Marine Corps in Brazil, and I was like 18, 19. It's not part of our school system. You do not develop yourself as an athlete. So I grew up doing judo and running because I saw my dad running. My dad was a judo and jiu-jitsu black belt. So I grew up going to the dojo. Um, I was fortunate enough to have that. But for most of the kids who didn't have that in school, they couldn't practice any sort of sports outside of school, because if they can't afford for school, how can afford for sports? Um, you know,
Yeah. And how would you kind of describe like your relationship with your parents and the approach that they took to raise you and your siblings.
Um, I would say uh, my dad, until I was 10 or 11 years old, he was an alcoholic. He was like a functioning alcoholic, you know. But we had fun. He was a lot of fun because, you know, you would go to the bars and as a kid, you're having fun, right? Um, then my parents, they 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 got baptized, they became Christians after that. And I think because the church kind of like saved my dad's life, especially. Um, he became completely obsessed with religion and and whatever church he was in was almost like a cult than anything else. Um, so it was a little rough growing up, a little bit of, you know, too much of violence, a little bit of under the name of God and saying like, hey, that's why we are doing this because this is God's discipline. At the end of the day, you just get in the hell, like your parents are just beating the hell out of you. But and their brain, they're like, oh no, this is God's service, you know. Um, so I had a pretty rough relationship, especially with my father. My mom was pretty much like, I don't want to be part of this, but I'm also, you know, my husband's wife. I have to oblige with this. Later on in life, he apologized for the mistakes he made, and now we're cool. Like, you know, we're friends and everything. But it took me a long time because I grew up pretty much in fear. Um, you know, I did not respect my father. I feared my father because um, you know, the church would guide them to physically punish their children until even if we had to bleed, until quote unquote God said, um, yeah, it's time to stop. Um, so that brought a lot of, you know, trauma, and completely affected me later on in life. And took a few years to undo all those things, but thankfully we are in a point that we're past that.
Got you, man. And wow, that's pretty interesting, man. It's just kind of thinking in my head, putting myself in their shoes. That's definitely a roller coaster ride for sure of a childhood, but I'm pretty sure it made you stronger overall. But kind of moving now into your decision to join the Brazilian Marines. So how old were you at the time, and what led you to making that decision?
I was 18. I was 18 years old. I had just finished high school, and I was, like you said, I was another roller coaster of emotions with my parents. Um, one day, my dad said, "Hey, if you don't take God's way, you have 6 months to move out. You got to move out." So I was planning on going to college, um, but I did not have any sort of support at that point. So my grandpa said my grandpa had served the Brazilian army for a little over 8 years. So he's like, "Hey, have you thought about going to the Marine Corps? If you pass on, you know, you have this written exam that they slotted out for the entire country. You take a written exam and you have to be on the top, let's say 2,000, 2,500 to go for like every quarter or something. And then if you pass, you move to another city to go, you know, do your training, your basic training and everything." I was like, well, if that's what I got, let me go for it. So I signed up for it and I didn't even know what it was. So I went, took the test, the written portion, the physical portion. Back in Brazil, we do have to pass our PT test before you ship out for training. So you have to meet some stern standards before you go to training. So I went through the whole process. And then yeah, that's how I joined. I was like, okay, now let me do some researches. When I was pretty much just waiting to go to basic training was when I started understanding what it was the Marine Corps down there. Um, and then, you know, slowly I started feeling a sense of pride. And, you know, my grandpa was telling me about his time in the military. So I got really psyched. I was like, oh, this is awesome. And I went.
What was the job that you that you chose? What was the initial job you started with?
So one of the different things is we do not have MOSs when we join as a, let's say, low enlisted. So you get your training first, your kind of sort of basic training or boot camp, and then right after that, you go to a unit. And whatever unit you're assigned to, that's your primary job for X amount of years until you make to corporal. When you go to a corporal, when you get your corporal, you go to academy, your NCO academy. Um, so you have to be pretty much a private for 4 years to qualify to go corporal. And you also have to take a test inside the Marine Corps, within the Marine Corps, make to the slots. And then if you pass, you choose your job, you pick your job. Um, and in that, NCO Academy lasts for 9 months. I chose my first option on my wish list was medic. And then um, and then communication comes, and then third one infantry, and then when I went to corporal school, I went comms.
Okay. And getting into when you ship out to basic training and kind of like how they call it here, AIT and all that stuff. How was those experiences for you, and was it like a huge culture shock for you?
Yes, absolutely. Like there were things that you expect that's going to happen, right? Like the physical training, the push-ups, but I had no idea how rough it was going to be. That was back in 2004, 2005. Um, So it was super different. It was really old school. They were allowed to lay hands on you. Um,
Wow.
yeah, not of course not on your face or anything like that, but we would get, slapped on the chest or in the back, or people push you away, throw you on the floor. We would see, drill instructors mopping the floor with the recruit sometimes. Like there was funny things, but it was definitely a cultural shock. Um, I don't even remember the first 2 or 3 days that was in basic training pretty much. It was just so much go, go, go. And their job as instructors is to make us quit. And if you say that you want to quit, there's no way back. There's no like, oh no, I was just kidding. I was just not mentally strong at that moment. Like, as soon as you say like, hey, I want to quit, they're like, you're going home. That's their job for 15 days to try to get as many recruit out as possible. And then they bring the new recruits in.
And which one do you feel is harder? Was that basic training and like their AIT harder, or was over here, going through the National Guard basic training IT harder for you?
It was there for sure. Yeah. That there is no doubt. I remember running a half marathon with my platoon sergeant in Brazil on a random Sunday. He was like, "Hey, we're gonna run until the last person is standing in this formation." And it was like 102 degrees in Rio. We were like boots and pants, no tops, um, just running, 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 going up and down hills, up and down the hills. And you're like, "I'm only going to stop when the last one falls down." Um, and
Wow.
we wouldn't sleep sometimes. We would get like 2 hours of sleep, an hour of sleep, or they would give us, like at 9 p.m. final formation type of style. They would go and mess up our entire barracks, throw sand, water, um, flip all the mattresses and everything, and they like at midnight they would release us and say, "Hey, wake up time's 4 in the morning. This barracks needs to be completely clean, spotless clean." So you'd spend your entire night cleaning instead of sleeping. So there was no, oh no, they need to get 3, 4 hours sleep. No, there were days there was like an hour sleep, 2 hours. Um, they were allowed to slap or the back of her neck when you're falling asleep in class, for example. So you die, you're dozing off, and somebody just wakes you up with this, huge slap on the back of your neck, and that was normal.
That makes
It's
that makes
super
me
different.
feel that makes me feel like everything I went through was not that bad as everybody makes it seems.
I
Just
mean,
that alone, like that. Oh, go ahead.
as a reminder, right? This was in 2004, 2005.
Yeah.
That was super different.
Yeah, just that run with the drill sergeant where you're going to the last person is like saying that one just that one's
Yeah.
crazy. But so you like I mentioned in the intro, you were in the NP for a year, you did 2 years in the airspace control unit, but I kind of want to go more into your time in the Second Infantry Marines and the Special Forces unit that you were in. So,
hmm
at what point did you check into Second Infantry Marines, and how were you even able to get into Second Infantry Marines?
So this MP unit is pretty much for everybody who finished basic training. If they are slotted there, they only stay there for a year. They don't stay there for more than a year. Um, so it's pretty much you get your feet in. If you didn't make to any of the infantry units or artillery units, whatever, like the combat units, you stay there for a year. So when I had the opportunity to go to another unit, I chose the second infantry. Um, so I was there for about 3 years. I was an athlete for that unit for a year as well as a judo athlete. So I was competing for the Marine Corps for a year, and also getting infantry train. Um, so we got to operate in Rio, and some of the you know drug cartel problems, and the government used to deploy us in the city. Um, so I really had a good time being an infantryman. Um, I was an M240 guy for a little while. I got to shoot mortars, part of the combat teams. Um, yeah, we got to do a
Okay.
lot.
So when you got to the unit, like overall, how did the people embrace you? Like, were they very hard on you at first, or were they very welcoming?
At first, you kind of, there's like a little bit of you got to prove yourself first. Who the who the fuck are you, right? You just this guy who showed up here. So you get the worst jobs, you get the worst assignments first. A lot of things that we do also in the military down there is public safety for our own units. For example, everybody needs to pull fire guard. For example, it doesn't matter your MOS, you're gonna pull fire guard maybe like twice a week, um, because our unit or division was actually right next to a slum. So you, on top of getting trained and you having the people in your unit, like kind of like you have to prove yourself who are you here, right? Show up for training, do the right things, get involved with the right people. Um, you also have that mentality of we need to keep this establishment safe because there could be an invasion at any time from drug cartel.
Okay. And overall, like the infantry experience, like the infantry training that you got, would you say was it really good? Kind of experiencing a little bit of what we kind of went through, like this, seeing the infantry training and tactics over here in the U.S. and the
Mhm.
National Guard. Would you say it was kind of on par? You still received pretty good training?
I would say it was pretty similar, but 15 years ago, 20 years ago was a little different. Things were a little outdated. But in regards to movement and techniques, they're super similar, especially because Brazil sends every year high-ranking NCOs here to America to this thing called Military Schools of America. So they learn techniques because since we're allies, if there is, World War III, will fight under the same sort of um, techniques in regards to movement, how to use, the fire teams and everything. So it was super similar because of that.
Okay. And just kind of from what you remember, what were some of like the best, and also what were some of the worst experiences you had um, being an infantryman in the Second Infantry Marines?
I think I'm going to start with the worst. The worst was first. I don't know if you're familiar with the AAVs, the
Yeah.
Marine Corps Armored Vehicle, the ones that get dropped off in the ocean. So it looks like a tank. is an armored vehicle that they put inside a Navy ship, right? And then you get dropped off in the ocean, let's say, either in the middle of the night, and then they ride that thing all the way to the coast. And then it would go do missions with those things. So just by being on a Navy ship for 7 to 8 days, waiting to get to the objective, it was just horrible. Being on a metal box in the middle of the ocean, that's gonna ride for 3 to 4 miles all the way to the coast, to get to the shore, and then you do an attack as an infantry platoon. Um, people are throwing up left and right. Everything smells like diesel inside. There's, the water is leaking. You can't see anything from inside. There's a metal box literally, and there's no windows, so you're just waiting, and you don't even know where you're going to. And next thing is like that thing hits the ground at the beach, and the door opens. You get out, and you start getting the commands from your platoon sergeant or your team leader, squad leader, team leader, and you at that point completely wet and soaking wet in ocean water, and then you're rocking at the beach to the objective or assaulting, and from there you walk for a couple miles and you dig holes, foxholes, and you stay on those things for days. So that was really interesting. I would say it was super miserable, but I actually, after doing it, I was like, fuck yeah, we did it. It's like it sucked, but um, yeah, every time they would pop up, it's gonna suck, and like, yeah, I'll go, whatever. Um, so I think in regards to training, that was one of the worst ones. It was just because the training is so long, to do a type of training like that. Um, when it comes to the best uh, experience that I've had, traveling, definitely was good to see different parts of the country, even though I didn't even get to go around sometimes to the cities. Um, but we did a lot of travel to train in other areas of Brazil, Western Brazil, jungle training, um, and the friendships. That was the biggest one for me, was the friendships.
Okay. And then, uh, kind of where did I guess, inspiration or the thought of trying out for Brazilian Special Forces, where did that come from?
Um, I had a few friends who went, and I had heard of it way before I joined. So they're like, oh, they call commandos down there, right? Like, oh, if you have operated with South American forces, special forces, they're called commandos. Um, and I had that thing in the back of my mind, is like, I want to be part of this group. One day would be, an honor. Which I didn't make to the what they call commandos. I went through selection, but I did not make it through the longest course, which is compared to our MASSOC and SEALs here in the US. Um, but I had some people that I met before, and they're like, dude, you got to do this. If you like physical stuff, you got to try this out. Um, so I put my name for the tryouts. I passed on the tryouts, and then I went for training.
Okay. And what preparation, if any at all, were you doing to get ready for selection?
Um, I asked a few of my friends who went through what they did. So I pretty much had a little training program where I would do some running, pull-ups, push-ups, weighted squats, with rucksack. Um, we had some sort of a number of step ups that we had to do with a weighted rucksack. So I was working and training at the same time. So I would either be training after work hours or during my work breaks. So, and swimming. We had to do a lot of swimming as well. Swimming with uniform, taking the uniform off, putting the gear on, taking the gear off, being able to swim with the uniform for 30 minutes at least. So there was a lot of swimming involved as well.
Okay. And what were you most concerned about, like going into that? Was it the PT? Was it land navigation? What was it that concerned you the most about selection?
Oh, land nav, because I always thought that land nav was something I was never completely confident at. But honestly, I think it was um, I think was the a little bit of the roughness and the violence, because they will hit you at any time. So they can hit you with ropes, paddles, anything. You are not as a SF trainee. You can only do push-ups and your knuckles, and they will come and kick it on. They will kick your hands. So that was a little bit of it was a little concerning for me because you don't want to get hurt. And that's actually what happened when I tried for what they call the commandos course, which 6 months long. Um, I ended up, got beat up and my knee was so swollen that I couldn't even bend my knee. Um, so that was one of the concerns at first. And
Okay.
the water, I was super confident in the water. Most people are not. Um, So the water was not that big of a deal, at least for
Yeah.
me at the time.
Yeah. The water is one of the greatest equalizers for sure.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
are you able to share at all, like kind of what the phases of selection are?
yeah. They don't really. They will have a what they call week zero. So week zero is pretty much you treated the worst of the worst that you have been ever been treated in your life. You don't get sleep. Um, they they have the kits, right? Standardized kits for every single um, person taking that course, going through selection. So it cannot make noises, whatever. And for anything they get that's wrong, you can get hit in the face. So you know you get really treated really poorly, and there's a lot of aggression. You get tased. You get tased to coming out of the water. You get drowned until you pass out. So that's the week zero. Um, those things they will last throughout the course, but when you get in the planning and execution, when they teach you a little bit of planning, um, like planning missions and stuff, it slows down a little bit because you need a little more of a technical phase. It's a more like a technical phase. Since the selection is just 8 weeks, so the 2 or 3 first weeks are the worst, and with the week zero. And
Okay.
then they have the planning phase and then the execution phase, where pretty much you go through those phases, learning how to plan, prepare, and then execute a mission. They will give you a target, and that target could be in different sort of environments that you need to be coming through the beach with a boat, Zodiac boat, for example, as a reconnaissance unit, or just just do a reconnaissance mission and not get um, um, caught by any of the destructors, for example, come back with the intel, and then you have your last mission, which we know we all gonna get caught, and then you get treated as a war prisoner for about a week.
Okay. And whenever you're experiencing things like sleep deprivation, physical torment, all those things like that, what's keeping you going mentally and physically?
For me, it was one being ashamed of quitting. Like, you look left or look right, and then you see two friends of yours there, or two people who you're connected with, and you're like, if these guys are here, why am I gonna leave? It's like, um, and knowing that it is temporary, which sucks. Um, but I think for the most part, it's looking to the right people and saying like, hey, if that guy hasn't even ring the bell yet, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And then if you see somebody doing it, you got to pretty much, put your mind on, I just need to make to the next meal or just need to make to tonight. I'll quit tomorrow. So there were things like that. It's like, I'll quit tomorrow. You just close your eyes, like, I'll quit tomorrow, and then go through the day. I think those are the biggest things for me.
Okay. So once you graduate, I know you say you didn't complete the full like for the commando experience, but like where
Uh,
do you get assigned once you graduate?
you get assigned to the Special Force unit. It's a Special Force battalion for the Marine Corps down there. And then
Okay.
you get your job, which it could be, reconnaissance unit or work with paratroopers only, or they have some sort of like kind of SWAT team that helps with crisis in the country, for example. I got assigned to a boat team, for example. So I was a boat pilot and crew leader for the boat team.
Okay. How was the tempo like with training within this unit? Was it very high tempo or like how would you rate that?
So when I was there at first, my first year wasn't that much because they had a lot of guys deployed in Haiti, and then when they came back, and then we started training with the U.S. Military 2009, 10, and 11, and then got really, really like high tempo, like let's go, one after the other. We had actually CBs come in, building little uh, uh, kind of like sort of wooden structures. They all U.S. Navy coming down to our unit, building environments for the guys to explode. So there was opportunities to train with different countries. So that was pretty cool too. But we were always busy, always doing something.
Got you. Uh, how hard do you feel like it was very hard to continue to, kind of hold the standard that you had in that unit and, having to prove yourself to your teammates day after day?
Um, I would say after you graduate, not much, but you definitely want to. You don't want to be that guy, that's not looking to any sort of self-improvement. Um, so I had a boss that he would he was the guy who would set the standard. Like your value is what you know and what you do. Pretty much he would tell us. If you don't know nothing and you do nothing, you have no value. So you shouldn't be here. Um, so I think personal development was big for us. It's like you have to hold yourself in a certain standard, which it can be hard when you're doing for so many years. Um, yeah.
Okay. And what was a memorable moment that you can remember of that you were enduring the suck? And that's kind of how we say, in the military, enduring the suck.
Yeah.
That you remember that you look back on and see it now though as like even though it sucked, it made me way better as a person. Um, if that makes sense, it just overall just kind of
It
made you
does.
better. Okay.
So there was a training that it was actually during selection that pretty much we were in this boat and they say, hey, your boat's down. So everybody's off the boat now. So you got to go to the beach. You go to the beach, everybody's like carrying the boats in their heads from one side to the other side of the beach. The whole story of carrying the boats. Um, and you're getting smoked all day long, all day long. Then after getting smoked at the beach, you all completely chafed. Your feet are destroyed. They put the boat back in the water. They remove the motor, and they leave you there for you don't know for how long. If it's going to be for 12 hours, 18 hours, 24 hours. with no food and no water, and they just leave you there. Um, and throughout the night, we'd have divers coming in and checking in people just to see if people are not passing out or anything crazy like that. Pretty much just to check you if you're healthy, good to go, and there's nothing wrong with you. Um, so knowing that people are coming and you'd get, so they would give us crackers, maybe let's say a handful of crackers for the entire team in a boat and a sip of water for each. Then going from there to in the morning, making back to the beach, and then you in that environment for over 48 hours now, and they give you a map and they're like, here, land nav and this giant island and try to find your food. Um, and you're completely dehydrated, you're sleep deprived, and it's just knowing that there's no other choice. Like you have to find food if you want to stay in the course, if you want to stay in the training. You have to land nav, and you might walk for another 24 hours before you find your food. Um, and then you sleep in the water, in the mud, you sleep whatever, like, or you don't sleep. So you have a choice, right? So those hard days where um, things get extremely hard and you're extremely tired, um, it puts perspective into life and then makes you believe that it can be so much worse, that we can endure so much more that we don't even know. Um, and I've had, friends in the training that guys who would black out completely during a ruck march, 30 miles ruck march, and people would completely black out and don't even remember. They're like, I don't even know how I did that. Um, and I think those moments, I will never remember being, completely covered in sand, hungry, sleep deprived, looking left or looking right. There's a bunch of other guys with you there, and you're just trying to make it to the next day, to the next day, to the next day. Um, yeah, I think that gives a lot of perspective in life.
Hey, man, wow, that's freaking amazing, man. Um, Kind of getting into the military schools you attended in Brazil. Just kind of tell us about that, the schools you attended, and just overall, like what your experiences were at those schools.
I went to combat mountain warfare, like mountain warfare school. I can't remember the right translation. Um, but yeah, it's when the ESL part plays. Um, and so that was super interesting as well. You're learning climbing techniques. So you're there for about a month. Um, and first things first, you have to learn knots. So you have to become, comfortable in heights. Um, and you're doing all those things. You're climbing rocks, you're climbing mountains with, the military way, with heavy rucksacks. You're not just doing by as a sport. Um, so that was one of the ones I enjoyed the most. Although it was really hard. I went to water surviving training. Um, that school was it was a school for us, so it was 2 weeks. So you get to experience the full, um, not a plane crash, but when a boat is sinking. So they pretty much put you in a boat and they tell you that your boat is sinking, whatever, they flip the boat, and then you got to find your way back to the shore or stay in this boat for 2 3 days, then complete missions after that. Um, so that was cool. That school was good. Um, but the mountain warfare school was the one I had, I enjoyed the most. I tried to go diving school. I didn't qualify at the time. Um, there is a thing that you got to do under the water, do some math. You got to put your whole gear, go on a scuba, like kind of like scuba diving, and under the water you got to do some math and quick thinking. And I did not pass on that one. Um, yeah, I think for schools was those. Besides the
Okay.
you know,
Getting into like a little bit about deployments that you had, because you were deployed to Rio and the western and southern border of Brazil to reestablish peace and order due to the cartels. So, kind of talking about that, how strong was the presence of the cartels in Brazil when you were in?
it was super strong at the time. Like Rio has ups and downs. São Paulo, same thing. There, times that gets better and then gets worse. I think every militia and cartels are like that, and they fight between themselves as well. Um, so my first experience with that was in 2006. It was during the elections. So we actually had so the intel found out that some of the guys running for uh, some of the politicians, they were paid off. They were paid by the cartels. They were infiltrated, um, and they were running for office, for a governor, for other things. And we had to go into the slums to pretty much chase them down so the police could arrest them. Um, so we would see firefights sometimes all night, or be in the firefights all night with cartels. They had, they're super strong. They would have, 50 cals, RPGs. They shot down 2 helicopters. Just to compare, in Rio, um, I think a couple of years ago, there was more than 3,500 homicides in a year just in one city, and they never been solved, including military personnel and police officers. Cartel members, they get a raise, or they get fame, or a status and their own culture, I would say, by killing police officers and military personnel. Um, so we would go into the streets with tanks, AAVs. Um, Pretty much, it's a full blown deployment, but you live in the city where you're getting deployed at, so you can't go home. You're not allowed to go home until the mission's over. Um, and 2006, 8, and 10, we were not even allowed to have our phone on us. No outside of communication. No communication with the outside world until the mission was over, um, to avoid any sort of intel leaking to the cartels as well. Um, yeah, and all of that because of drugs and illegal weapons.
And how was that like getting into gunfights with the cartel? Was it very shocking to you? Like overall, how did you respond to that?
First time I was in that situation, I remember I look it over and my LT was on a low crawl going under a LMTV. My platoon sergeant was dragging him out of there because he completely freaked out. He was probably 21, 22 years old. Um, and it was shocking because, like you a couple miles away from home, you may less than 10 miles away from your home. Um, and there is a crossfire going on. So responding to that, one of the first things I had in my mind was I need to cover my face because you don't want to get recognized. You don't want to be recognized on the streets, being part of that sort of operation. Um, and it's coming. It's going to happen. You just don't know when it's going to happen. And I think that's when complacency plays, a lot, huge role because you're you're on the streets day in, day out for many, many days, sometimes months, and nothing happens until it happens, right? And then it's scary. I mean, it's scary.
I think just kind of concluding your time in the Brazilian military. Um, just want to cap it off with what overall like were the reasons that you decided to leave the Brazilian military?
For me, it was the sense of always being in danger. Because if we compare with the military here, right? Like if you're in uniform here and you go somewhere else for lunch, sometimes someone's gonna pay for your food and thank you for your service, right? We don't get that. Brazil went through a military dictatorship for over 30 years, so a portion of the population is still um, traumatized um, by any type of military,
Yeah.
and people are not as friendly. And so you feel like you're living in danger. You're not really recognized a lot, and you're not getting paid decently. You don't get good benefits. I started feeling like I could do better in life if, doing something else. I knew how my career started, and I know how it was going to end. And I knew I had to do 30 years to 35 years in active duty to get a pension, to get retirement. Um, then when I had the opportunity to operate with the international forces like the US, and I figured that I was like, hey, I might as well just learn another language because I needed a translator to translate things for me all the time when I was working with US Marines, US Navy, um, and other countries as well. So that for me played a big role on, staying or not staying. Then I lost a few friends, um, and that was it for me. I was like, I need to get out. I was just not feeling well mentally, emotionally, and I felt like I wasn't getting compensated.
Okay. And then, of course, eventually you decide, kind of fast forwarding, you decide to join the National Guard. Um, what was it about the National Guard that made you want to join that specific branch?
So first, I went to see a active duty recruiter. Right. At the time, I was going through a divorce here, and since my ex-wife was my sponsored when I came to America, um, and she was American citizen, and I was going through a divorce. So my active duty recruiter said, "Man, your case is complicated. You have military time in another country. You're going through a divorce. Your green card is only good for 2 years. Um, I don't think I can help you." So I had taken an ASVAB. Then a National Guard recruiter called me. He's like, "Hey, I've seen you have taken an ASVAB and you didn't make it. I think I can get you in." So he asked what happened. I explained to him, in details. And he was like, "I think I can help you." So he said, "You can change and go active duty anytime." I was like, "Okay, hell yeah, let's do it." Um, so I joined the Guard, and I spent my first 3 years in the Guard trying to go active duty. It never happened. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was my story with the Guard. But honestly, right now, I do appreciate that I I did through the Guard and I'm in the Guard. Um, I still having time for personal development, professional development, uh, family. I'm remarried and my wife has 2 kids. We bought a house, so she was active duty. She came from, military life, and she's like, "I'm done with moving and serving in different places and countries." She was in Germany, Iraq, Kuwait, and so I'm glad that I actually am in the Guard.
Okay. Overall, how has been being a combat medic in the Guard for you?
I would say that we don't really, for what I've seen from my active duty side friends, we get, good training. We get a good training. If you're on top of your things, you can know and learn. Um, I'm working on OLS, as you know, and we get training there all the time, every week as a medic. Um, so it's been good. I've been having the opportunity to use my skills and help others. And either training or actually in real life.
Okay. And what are some kind of pros and cons of being in the Guard that you can share for someone who is looking to join the National Guard and maybe even trying to become a combat medic in the Guard?
Let's start with the pros, right? If you're in school, you have time, you most likely will have time to finish school, to come in with a better education, right? Or to get out with some sort of education. Um, you get more family time, I think. Um, but I think for anyone, right? I know this is not the route for everyone, but I think everyone could benefit from serving full-time active duty, even if it's just a contract of 3 years. Especially if you're coming fresh out of high school, see your options, find what's best for you, what are you looking to. Um, and if you do come as a combat medic, looking to become a paramedic, to one day if you get out, you have a valuable skill for the civilian side. I think on the active duty side, there is more opportunities when it comes to school. Um, you also don't have to worry about a paycheck or making a paycheck or getting a job that you can line up with drill and training. So on active duty, that's your job. If you go active duty, use that time to develop yourself. If you're into some type of emergency medical services, and yeah, and go from there.
I don't know if this will make sense. I just wanted to ask one more question in terms of National Guard. Is there any fascinating medical teachings that you learned that kind of like really wowed you?
Yes, I actually 2021, we had medical training with some of the SF guys. Um, and it was really eye-opening to see that sometimes what we see in the books um, does not apply to real life, or that we also need to think outside of the box, right? Um, there are cases and cases. So during that training was a 21-day training. It was super valuable to hear and listen to what those guys have seen out there. Um, for example, you don't do a crike on something that's moving, right? If you're inside a box or a vehicle that's moving, you don't do a crike. And they explain the reasons why. And it seems intuitive, but people will make bad decisions, or some sort of they expose us to some combat environments, in teaching and techniques that we don't learn by the books. So that was really good, and they're all SF guys from the Guard.
Yeah, that's another, I would say, another plus about if you do join the National Guard or if you're in the Army, um, that those are two good units, 19th group and 20th group.
19th
19th
group,
being, yeah, those are really good if you do
absolutely.
decide to stay reserves and you want to challenge yourself. They do get a lot of preparation with SFRE, making sure you're gonna have a buddy who went. He didn't make it through SFRE, but he had nothing but good things to say about it. Um, that would lead them to success going into SFAS and then Q course, etc. So if you are looking to go Special Forces route, 100% 19th or 20th group is very good. But
Absolutely. I myself actually went there 2021 to the 19th group at Bullis. Um, the only reason I didn't go because they wanted me to change my MOS, and I love being a medic. So I was like, no, thank you.
that's crazy because
But
I feel like,
they're
okay.
go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's crazy because out of the 18 Bravo weapons sergeant, 18 Charlie communications, 18 Echo. No, I'm sorry. 18 Charlie is like combat engineer kind of things, like engineer. 18 Echo
Hmm.
is comms. But what I'm trying to get to is out of all of that, they have 18 Delta, which is for medics. You would think they would need that because not a lot of people kind of volunteer for that. To be honest, they want to be a weapons guy or a combo guy, etc. So that's just kind of crazy to me. They wanted you to change your enlist.
Yeah. For some reason, they were overstriking medics. They're like, I have too many medics here.
Wow.
And it's actually super hard to graduate as a medic, as a Green Beret and or SF or 18 Delta, um, because it's a 2-year school, and it's super brutal.
Yeah, I actually have a buddy who was in my OSA class. He just graduated 18 Delta, and we graduated like OSA in 2022. He's still in the pipeline, hasn't even like
Oh
really finished
shoot.
the Q courses, so he's still there. But I
Oh
can only
shit.
assume it's amazing training, and hopefully I can get that guy on here one day to talk about it because I mean, he was 21 when he got selected, so that was crazy within itself. 21, 22. But
That's
anyway,
crazy.
not to derail or derail on that whole topic, but yeah, that's what I want to talk about. But kind of changing topics and kind of going towards the tail end of the episode, we'll start to kind of conclude. And I did want to talk about suicide, topics like depression, um, abortion, and some bad decisions that you made growing up that others can learn from, maybe even others I'm sure can relate to. And obviously, I asked you if you were willing to talk about this before I brought it up, so I just wanted to throw it out there. I'm not bringing up these topics without
No, it's
permission,
fine.
of course. So just to the viewers. But anyway, so starting with suicide, you said you dealt with a suicide, excuse me, with a friend in Brazil and someone in the medical section in the guard. If you can kind of just now, obviously not talk about you know what specifically happened, but just how that impacted you and what you can remember if you had any memories about them.
Absolutely. This guy in Brazil, man, yeah, we were drinking out after work hours, playing pool. Um, he was the type of guy you would never thought he was, he was already out. Um, so he had already gotten out of the military. Um, and we on a Friday just drinking, playing pool, and he looked at me and he had two cell phones, and he said, "This cell phone here, there was a black one, little one. When it rings, don't touch it. Nobody touches it, not even my wife." So apparently he got involved with the wrong people, um, and you would never think that that type of person would commit suicide. He was probably at a point of his life that he thought no one could help him, and he did it. Um, and suicide is something that it is really large in our community and in the veteran community, unfortunately.
Mm.
Um, and if you're listening to this and watching this, and you know somebody or you've been there and you thought about it, suicide will impact the lives of the ones around you. Um, it makes you feel like you didn't do a good job as a person, to keep that person alive. Even if you think no one wants you, no one wants you around, or the best solution for everybody is for you to be gone. That's a lie. Um, that is your mind looking for escape. Um, and that's when you work closely with somebody who's been fighting the fight and they lose the fight, it makes you feel worthless, that you didn't do a good job, that you could have done something, you could have said something, right? We as we grow in life and as we get older, we all go through struggles, either that whether that be financially or mentally or emotionally. We all go through struggles. We all go through highs and lows, and sometimes the lows are really lows. They're really low. And talk to someone, you know, open up, and mental health, in self-care, be active, physically active. There is a way to get out of that, you know, black hole or that bubble. Um, it's just it impacts everyone around us. You probably, have seen news of people they were there and then they aren't anymore. They went home after drill or after training, and now they're not with us. Um, so I vividly remember those two individuals, like, um, good people. You know, usually they are good people. Um, they're just troubled, and find a friend who can listen to you and, um, work with you and guide you.
100%, man. And I want to share just one thing about, you know, I've I had a friend. Obviously, I'm not gonna go into specifics just because that's his privacy. I've not even asked him for permission about it or anything. But um, anyways, yeah, I had a friend who was dealing with suicide, and it was shocking because he seemed on the outside like he was very strong, but something had happened, a traumatic experience where it made him crumble. And I remember, man, I forgot what happened, but he was basically like alluding to it, and I didn't text him. I wasn't like, "Hey, I'm on the way," because in my mind, I was like, if I say that, there's a possibility it might speed the process up. Like, crap, I'm gonna do it before he gets here. So I'm just kind of giving him motivational advice. I'm just trying to stick it with him through text and stuff like that. And I head over there. I try to get over there as fast as possible. And when I got there, I was scared. I was like, man, like, what if I walk into this and he didn't? And it's something that I can never erase out of my mind, you know. But thank God, he was there, and just the emotion I felt from him, um, it was crazy. But what I'm trying to get to is the power of having somebody there, and knowing that someone will be there and can be there for you was pretty impactful to him. And also, um, seeing how he came out of it. He didn't quit. He didn't give up. He kept pushing, and he's doing so much better now. It's crazy. And he looks back on all that experience as a learning experience. So I say that to say that even though you may not see light at the end of the tunnel right now, I promise if you keep pushing, the light's eventually going to come, and better things are going to come for you. So I just wanted to share that that little
Absolutely, man.
step of the
And I
moment.
appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate you sharing that because that takes a lot of courage to step into the arena, right? Like, hey, that's my friend, and let me take action before something happened. And I had people who done that to me as well. I was extremely depressed and I had no idea in my mid 20s. Um, I was heavily drinking. I I've always been athletic. I quit sports. I was just drinking, drinking, drinking my life away. I came out of bad relationship. My fiance had an abortion without asking me or asking my opinion on it. Um, and I remember getting a phone call when she said, "Can you come to the hospital and pick me up?" And well, the reason she had an abortion at the time was because she didn't know if she was sleeping with somebody else. She didn't know if it was his or mine. Um, And my low after that was extremely low. Um, I woke up in the police station a couple times after fighting and blacked out. Um, had, fights with people that I don't even remember. And I remember my cousins and friends saying like, "Hey, police officer almost killed you last night. What are you doing?" Had their parents come in to talk to me, to check on me, and tell me, "Hey, you can do better. You, what's going on? You not this." Um, so having the people, being a good friend, I had those type of friends who did with the same thing you did. I never considered killing myself, but at the same time, I was putting myself in situations, um, where it could easily die at any time, um, because I was hanging out with people that I shouldn't. I was going to places that I shouldn't be there, um, and And I'm glad I had friends who stepped into, the arena and said, "Hey, man, come here. This is not right. This is not you. There is a better version of you that you can find if you get out of this." Um, when I look back 12 to 14 years ago, I don't even recognize that person who who I was. It feels like it was somebody else, not me, you know. And I think it is important to know that life has ups and downs, highs and lows, and the lows are the parts of life that actually teach us the most, I believe.
Definitely,
Yeah, just to complement what you're saying,
100%. Um, what what were some things or techniques, strategies, or maybe even people? What were some things that kept you kept you going, kept you living? If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I got into rock climbing. I had been already into rock climbing, but I found a group of friends who were extremely passionate about climbing. So, quote unquote, was a physical activity, right? So that group of friends gave me a new perspective of life. I started thriving to be better because I wanted to be like them. To be one of them, to be like them, I couldn't be the same person I was. I had to make changes. Um, so I think connecting with this, the type of people that I was fortunate to meet, um, was big for me. Um, I started seeing life in a much different way, connecting with nature, hiking, climbing, um, doing physical activities, just being by myself and learning how to be by myself alone in nature, um, doing trail runs, all those things, they started coming together. I found value on life and life through physical activities, being outdoors, exploring, and walking with people who want to do better in sport and life. That was a catalyzer for me.
Yeah, and yeah, man, I want to thank you for sure for you know having the bravery and courage to share
Appreciate it.
this experience and just kind of this wisdom, because this is something that on future episodes for those who have these experiences or get with others that have experienced this, that's definitely something that if they're willing to share that, I want to talk to about with them, create that awareness and start talking about it, because and something that's very big, and not just in the military community, but just overall in the population that continues to happen on daily. So if we're able to talk about this and maybe save one life, that's what matters to me, and that's what's awesome. But hey, man, Igor, man, we kind of covered everything, man. And kind of the short time frame that we kind of had, and I think was very successful, and I think we covered everything that we needed to cover. But kind of before we do go, is there any final thoughts that you would like to share before we conclude the episode?
No, I think like I said, we covered everything. Yeah. If you ever find me anywhere, social media, I'm open to talk about it. If you need to talk to someone, um, about any topic we discussed here, I told him like, hey, I'm an open book, man. I don't care. Um, like you said, if everything we spoke here, it was valuable for somebody, career wise, mental health wise, um, fitness wise, whatever. Um, if it's going to help one person, I'm okay. I'm really satisfied as well. So I appreciate you inviting me and opening this space here, for us to talk about that.
100%, man. Thanks again for coming on. Well, guys, that concludes the episode. So really appreciate you if you did tune into this and you did watch it, not just all the way to the very end or whatever topic that you gravitated towards, because I know I put chapters on it. I really appreciate you watching it. If there is someone that you know that can benefit from the story, from any of the topics that we discussed, please share it to them. And let's get these stories out there. So without further ado, man, that's it. And I'll see y'all next time.